Hello, everyone, and welcome to another interview here on the Herald's Horn. This week, I am joined by the executive reviews editor of IGN, Tom Marks, to discuss what kind of already feels like old news. Isn't that crazy how quick magic works? We are talking about the Through the Omenpaths, the new technology that Wizards of the Coast will be using to put universes beyond standard legal sets that they don't have digital rights to onto Arena and MitGo with, aka completely flavor swap sets. We'll get really into it. Tom also gets to do pretty much all of the Magic coverage for IGN. They get to do a lot of set previews. They've done the Marvel previews. They did the first look at some secret layers, all that kind of stuff. He gets to do that. So he has a lot of thoughts about this from some coverage perspectives, from a Magic player perspective himself. He hit me up and said I had a lot of thoughts, and I was like, well, me too. So I've been looking for an excuse to have him on the show ever since I did a bonus interview with him. Gosh, over a year ago now. That was over on the Patreon. I think it hit the main feed eventually. But before we get started, though, a little quick bookkeeping here. I'm going to put something similar to this on the feed and on YouTube on Thursday as well. But I am going to take a short 2-week break from the Herald's Horn. Pretty much ever since the show started at the beginning of 2024? Holy moly. I have been pushing pretty hard. I haven't really ever gotten a chance to take a break. Obviously, it used to be every other week. For the last several months, nearly 6 months now, it's been a weekly show. Turns out, even a bi-weekly show or a weekly show, if you just stay on the treadmill, it can become pretty tiring. I'm going to take a chance to relax a little bit. I'm going to take a chance to apply some critical thinking, to some different parts of the show, some different parts of my process, see if I want to change anything, see what I like, see what I don't like. I listened to an early episode of the show a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, there's some stuff in here that I immediately forgot that I was doing, and I'd kind of like to bring that back. So we will be taking a very small vacation here on the Herald's Horn, and that means the next you hear from me will be May 15th when we're back with a normal episode, and I'm sure we'll have a ton to listen to, talk about. Without any further ado, let's get into this great conversation with Tom Marks. Hello, and welcome to another interview here on the Herald's Horn. This week, I am joined by Tom Marks. I already introduced him. Tom, Thank you for stepping into the Horn this week.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
I was about to say, this is technically your second appearance here on the Herald's Horn, a Patreon exclusive interview long ago that also eventually hit the main feed as those do.
But now we actually get to talk about Magic.
I was about to say, we didn't talk about Magic that time. We get to talk about Magic that time. Tom hit me up and he was like, hey, that whole Through the Omenpaths, digital universes beyond stuff going on? I have a lot of thoughts about that, actually. You want to have me on? And I was like, sure. Hey, I wish more people asked me to be on the show. Honestly. So, listener, I'm going to set the table here for you real quick. What is Through the Omenpaths? What is digital universes beyond? Well, that's relatively self-explanatory if you know what universes beyond is. Let's just define that first. Universes beyond is the Magic the Gathering product line that features Magic the Gathering cards with other people's intellectual property on them, i.e. Final Fantasy, Spiderman, Warhammer 40k, etc. That's Universes Beyond. Through the Omenpaths is a weird little tech that Magic the Gathering announced, and by tech I mean overhaul, that Magic the Gathering announced this previous, Monday? Yes. Here is what Through the Omenpaths is. If you are at all familiar with the Universes Beyond product, you then know that some of them, i.e. Warhammer 40k, i.e. Fallout, have had a real rough history coming onto digital platforms such as Arena or Magic the Gathering Online, such that they appear for a week, they never come at all, they will never come at all, they may come in the future, all that kind of stuff. Well, with other people's IP, that does kind of make sense. Getting the IP rights for a digital card game and a physical card game, I imagine, are a bit different. And some entities, such as, for example, Marvel, already have very strong partners in the space of digital card games, and therefore it is understandable why it may be hard or impossible for Wizards of the Coast to get those rights or they're just lazy. I haven't figured out which one it is yet. Now, Universes Beyond sets are all going to pretty much be standard legal, sans the Commander decks. So if there is an IP that Wizards of the Coast needs online, obviously, you have to have your standard legal sets on Magic the Gathering Arena. You have to have your standard legal sets on Magic the Gathering Online. What's the solution? Enter Through the Omenpaths, completely flavor swapped, i.e. new names, new art, same rules text, new flavor text versions of all of the cards in a Universes Beyond set will be coming just to Magic the Gathering Arena and Magic the Gathering Online in the case of these sets if they can't get the rights. That is the case specifically for Magic the Gathering Marvel's Possessive Spider-Man, the upcoming Universes Beyond set. It turns out Wizards of the Coast could not get legal rights or to the IP for a card game, given the fact that Marvel seems to have their IP split between 500 different stakeholders at any time. That makes a lot of sense. So instead of getting Marvel's Spider-Man, like we will in paper, to fill that same standard legal slot on Arena and on Magic the Gathering Online, we will get the exact same cards, but with in-universe, in Magic Universe names, flavor text, and art. That was a really long-winded explanation to say that Wizards of the Coast has to do 2 sets worth of creative for some of their upcoming Universes Beyond stuff. It's a bit concerning. Tom, yes. What are your thoughts? You have so many. What's up? It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I saw this and it struck me as sort of like some of the low-key biggest Magic news we've gotten in a while. Right? It's one of those things where they just sort of, not that they were trying to hide it, but they sort of just snuck it out in a pretty short blog post the day before 5 cards were unbanned in Commander and there were big updates, right? And then that sort of dominated the conversation in Magic Circles Online now going forward. And I do think it's a really big deal. And I think when we get to the Spider-Man set in September, I think it is, it's gonna be a problem. Like, it's gonna be a thing people are really talking about again.
It is interesting that, like you said, incidentally, it was in the conversation zeitgeist for a few minutes because it is a really big piece of news, but then, large ban and restricted update for specifically Commander. It's always going to take over the news zeitgeist for whatever is happening in Magic.
Yeah, of
this
course.
Incidentally already feels like old news, but it's really not.
No, yeah, and it's going to be crazy. And like the reason that I had all of these thoughts is it's sort of hard to wrap your head around it, right? So they've already said that Final Fantasy and the Avatar set will be coming to Arena as Universes Beyond, and that they kind of, as far as they made it clear in the wording of that blog post, is that none of the Marvel sets would be. They would all be Through the Omenpaths, which is, if that is indeed the case and does not change, huge, right? That Marvel, the biggest, the Final Fantasy set, I think has a lot more sort of energy behind it in some sense, but Marvel is the biggest IP in a larger sense globally. It's one of the top 10 IPs. And to just fully not have that in any digital capacity that's a really, really big thing. That is massively sort of, that's going to shift how people perceive these sets. It's going to shift how people talk about these sets. It's going to shift the appeal of this set, that you can't just be like, oh yeah, you like playing your Spider-Man cards, you should download the online client, because then if somebody, doesn't have that or didn't have that before and they're like, oh, well, I can't play with Spider-Man, so why would I do that, right? Like there's huge ramifications. And I think on top of that, the one of the other reasons it's really hard to talk about is because it's confusing at different amounts for different levels, certain like play levels and experience levels. Like the absolute most casual person who just like turns on Arena and plays some Arena on their phone while on commuting on the bus, or
they'll just be playing Magic the Gathering. Cool,
they're not gonna
same
care.
as it ever was.
Yeah,
yep.
But there are people. I mean, we've seen reports from LGSs of people coming in and saying, hey, do you have this alchemy card that I could buy, not knowing that it doesn't exist? And that is only going to get worse. And not only is it going to get worse with Spider-Man, every set that you add to this pool that does not look like it should makes everything worse. It compounds that problem. And if we're getting more, we know we're getting more Marvel sets. So, if in 2 years' time, there's 3 sets in the standard pool that don't look like how they should, out of 10 or whatever, that's a huge portion of standard that doesn't look how it should. I guess it's more than 10 now because it's potentially 6 sets a year, 3 years. So it would be, at rotation, maybe like 12 to 15. That's still like, potentially 20% of your standard not looking how it should.
That's a lot of cards.
Yeah. So it's weird. It's complex. It's complicated. I worry about my perspective from IGN is we do a lot of Universes Beyond reveals, right? We revealed the first cards for Spider-Man, which were in those scene boxes. We revealed the Final Fantasy Commander decks. And I get a sense kind of behind the scenes on our numbers of like where people's interest are in these things. And, the more casual audiences really love or hate Universes Beyond personally, that audience loves it. And it gets them in the door. And so to then just say, oh, it doesn't exist on Arena is like really, really brutal, even outside of all of the complexity issues it introduces.
Yeah, I think to start with like the complexity issues, I think that is definitely the thing that perhaps worries me the most. It does create like such an information, even like for your most invested players. Say someone is grinding out, they're grinding out matches both in paper or online, or they're using an online client, probably MitGo, possibly Arena, depending on the format you're playing, to grind out testing for a event like the RC or the Pro Tour or something like that. Stuff like being familiar with cards, being able to glance at an art, know what it does, read it again, sure. Like being familiar with cards is really important for helping the most invested audience, or even your like medium invested audience, be able to navigate that space. It makes playing a game so much easier if everyone can kind of just glance at a card and have 80% sure what it does. That does completely remove that like exchange of information in between the digital and physical platforms so much. Plus all of those problems that you were talking about, specifically in that like, yeah, there will be people who are interested in getting into paper Magic who love, I kept calling it like the Bleeble Blorp set on my, on our episode where we talked about this for a couple minutes. Someone will enjoy the Spider-Man IP set on Arena and say, cool, I really want this card. I'm going to go to the LGS. And I guess there's at least some, there's at least some aspect there where the LGS could go, aha, what you actually want is, but that's still just so needlessly complicated. It is fascinating to me that Wizards of the Coast found IP, it's Marvel, I get it, right? But Wizards of the Coast, and maybe Marvel is the only IP that we will see this for. I have a feeling it may not be. But it is fascinating to me that Marvel found this IP so valuable that they said, okay, cool, we don't need the digital IP rights. We will do a whole redo of flavor for the entire thing, introduce all of these really weird side incentives, all of these really weird happenings, and then that's fine. That's cool.
Yeah, the skepticism that it raises in me, whether this is fair or not, is, oh, this is going to be a slush art set, right? And again, we don't know that that's the case. I don't want to just immediately write it off as that, but that is the fear it evokes in me is, oh, this is just going to be stuff they didn't use for Foundations or other sets that, that's what slush art is art that they commissioned for something and then it didn't get used and it goes into a big pile. I think we know that Alchemy, some cards in Alchemy can sometimes be like reusing slush art like that. I don't think that's always, but I think they have said that that is a thing they've done for Alchemy, and they reuse slush art for other sets and you never notice because they're really good at their jobs and good at using art that makes sense in the right sets. So I have some faith there, but it sounds on the surface like such a large task that I don't think what we're going to get is a, alternate universe Innistrad set or New Capenna, that is all Spider-Man things, but, you know, now they're New Capenna. I don't think it's going to feel cohesive in any way. And you know, of course, Foundations worked, right? Foundations is fine. That takes from history of magic and all these different places, and it doesn't have to be, you know, everything has to be Tarkir to feel like magic-y still.
But I was going to say, we have had a lot of core set in the past.
Right.
Core sets in the past that aren't super cohesive, but those sets weren't very popular. Like, core sets have come and gone because not super cohesive Magic the Gathering sets, in addition to other problems that core sets have. You open a pack and you're like, cool, this is a bunch of Magic cards.
Right.
Which is different than opening a pack and saying, wow, Tarkir, or, you know.
It also, you know, if you're a Vorthos, means you don't get as much story for those things unless they're going to go out of their way to tell you little stories about Magic characters that they wouldn't have had an opportunity to. And then if they do that, everyone playing in paper only gets completely left out of all of that stuff, and suddenly their favorite legendary character is another card, you know, confined to a digital space that they don't ever interact with, which I think is a valid complaint there. It just raises so many questions, and it's so like the biggest thing, the moment I had yesterday where I really was like, kind of had a click in my head was, are they even going to be able to say on Arena that these are actually Spider-Man cards?
Yeah, that like, hey guys, here is the Marvel's Spider-Man.
Right, because if you have the Wanderer, there's not going to be a note in that card on Arena that says this is actually Gwen Stacy, right? They're not going to legally be able to do that. They're not even going to be able to say, and this is speculation, they're probably not even going to be able to say, hey, play this set, which is actually Marvel's Spider-Man, because by saying Marvel's Spider-Man on the Arena client, does that? We don't know yet. Maybe that'll be fine. Maybe they will. But like, that is the confusion and complication that this could come up with. The other thing I will say is I do think that there are ways that they can design and mitigate for this that are not catastrophic. Like, the quickest example is the One Ring would need to be reskinned because it was a meta card that was used everywhere. Orcish Bowmasters could get some new art and exist on Arena, not as a Lord of the Rings card, right? You wouldn't have to change the name. You wouldn't have to change the mechanics. It would just be Orcish Bowmasters with new art. And there's, you know, alternate arts all over the place. Whatever. So, like, if they go into these Marvel sets knowing that they're going to have to name things more generically, and especially the things that they know or assume are going to be played in constructed, that does make things easier. But then the flip side of that coin, because again, there's 1,000 layers to this. The flip side of that coin is, does that mean that you are making your set less Marvel-y so that you can make these things work better because you know you have to reskin everything? And we don't know is the answer yet. And we're not gonna know until this set comes out. But the fact that this is a conversation we could even be having about what should be one of the marquee, most exciting sets of the year for them from a Universes Beyond perspective is indicative of how rough this deal is for them flat out, right? It is a big drag and a big problem that will just continue to sort of snowball as more and more of these come out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think there's like one very small, I referenced this on the show, there's one very small like silver lining to this or whatever for Wizards of the Coast. I think probably one of the, to piggyback off what you were saying there a little bit, I think a problem that they will have moving in the future with Universes Beyond is that, like, as far as we can tell, Wizards of the Coast has licenses for these IPs for like X amount of print runs or a window of time in which they are allowed to print those cards and use that art and specifically use that IP. Because we have started to see some reprints of Universes Beyond cards. We've had a really generic Fallout card get reprinted with new art. I think we've had a really generic Warhammer 40K card get reprinted with new art. I think if anything, the small silver lining that exists here is that maybe there's a world where if if the amazing Spider-Man legendary creature becomes really popular.
Spider.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever the in-universe version of that from Arena is, hey, that's already set and ready to go. We have art, we have creative, chuck it in a precon, whatever, put it in a secret lair, who knows. That like is already done, so maybe it'll be easier for us to get reprints of these cards down the line, but everything else about it I think is just bad.
Yeah, it is. Again, I think that despite a lot of the mistakes they make, I think Wizards has proven that they do know how to make Magic sets well, especially, from the producing a ton of art standpoint. Although obviously, there's problems there recently of like the increasing, there have been a couple cases of plagiarism, a couple cases of AI that people have called out in different things. I'm not saying they're immune from that, but like, they are good at making Magic sets at the end of the day, and I think that there is a certain amount of faith earned that they could do this in a way that is impressive and feels like a good set still. But to your point, it still just causes all of these other problems that are whether they execute it well or not. And on top of that, it's very concerning that it's not going to be executed well, because if it doesn't get executed well, then it is a problem. And suddenly, people who are looking forward to drafting the Spider-Man set are now getting maybe, a slush art core set instead is like that's a drag. That's a drag. There's no other way to put it. That's a drag. And that, again, that gets away. That's not even considering the fact that Pro Tour grinders are going to have to use 2 different sets of cards, or if they do a digital tournament that they're casting, the cards are going to be different. They're going to have to be like, oh yeah, that card is Spider-Man actually, or whatever. It's just so complicated.
And it is so funky because I think there is a world where we do see it treated almost like a whole real Magic set, in that
sure,
there is a lot of creative, I had Roy Graham, the story lead of Wizards, on a couple weeks ago, and he was like, hey guys, don't worry, we have jobs, we will be working on stuff during when Universe Beyond sets are out. Maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's not. But like the idealized version of this is like maybe, yeah, the Spider-Man set is in a whole in plane set. Maybe it's a plane that we haven't been to before, and they've done a lot of cool narrative work that only people invested online will see maybe. And we, have this really cool product of Magic the Gathering, and it hits well and it's firing on all cylinders, and we get to see some characters we haven't seen in a while, and hey, maybe some people who are upset about us having a Universe Beyond set in a standard slot get to have some fun with real quote-unquote Magic stuff. And that is the absolute best scenario, best outcome. It makes it easier for them to reprint stuff in the future. And then they still just have all of these very basic problems of tournament grokkability, making the jump from online to digital and digital to online that much harder, a lot of confusion, a lot of really weird issues, all that, like you were saying, and then it seems relatively unlikely to me that will be what we actually end up with, like a real quote unquote Magic the Gathering set in universe, all new art, a lot of effort put in like you would to the creative of a normal Magic set. There's a lot of slope to go down, like you were saying. It could just be a slush art core set. And
right. I think you hit the nail on the head there, where I think the universe you're describing of them absolutely nailing it is not an unrealistic one. I think that is a universe we could live in, and that could be where it is, and everyone is I'm apologizing in however many months for sort of doubting them in this way. I think that's totally plausible. But exactly what you're saying, even if it is the universe we live in, that doesn't solve the other problems that come with it. It's just it feels, and I don't envy anybody, to be clear also, I'm glad they're doing this rather than just not bringing the set to digital. That would have been a truly catastrophic decision, right? Yep. So I give them props for doing this at all. But that doesn't even get into some of the other things of this is just, it's just so there's just so much. There's so much that could go wrong.
And I think even too, just like the very baseless thing about it that's so frustrating is that it will make talking about the game probably pretty difficult.
Yeah. Well, you know what occurred to me? How are spoilers going to work?
I know.
Is every content creator who gets a spoiler card get two versions of the card and they have to spoil them together? Is that going to complicate spoiler season where now instead of celebrating Spider-Man, we're also showing, Avacyn for some reason or whatever? Like it's just...
I have a feeling maybe the way that it'll almost just have to work just to keep the hype as high as possible for Spider-Man, because that's what they paid a ton of money, obviously, to get the chance to do, is probably like a full normal thing for Spider-Man, and then maybe a really short thing for the online version, or they just get a gallery dump. It's just like, here you go.
I would not be surprised if that's the way it happens, yeah.
Yep. Or something really akin to an Alchemy preview season, however those work anymore. I don't remember how the Alchemy preview seasons work anymore. But that kind of discussion is hard, and something that came up, I mean, it won't affect you at IGN per se as much. You guys do a little bit of different coverage than a lot of other like really invested in Magic publications do, but it was interesting hearing Emma talk about how she's concerned about, she is not head of content at TCG Player, but she does a lot of editorial, writes a lot, all that kind of stuff. I cannot imagine how hard it's going to be to cover this set from a more invested perspective from people, in that you're writing a big long article about standard deck lists and stuff. What do you even do? Where do you even start? What cards are we using?
Who is your audience?
Who gets to write this style guide? I don't want to be.
Because I switch from paper to digital fairly frequently. I use Arena and MTGO and play at paper and all that stuff in my LGS, but there are large audiences of very invested players who only play digitally or only play paper. And so suddenly when Emma is writing an article about a deck list, who is she talking to? Who is her audience? What is that audience looking for? And if you use the wrong, do you say both cards, or if you use the wrong card, then, are you alienating those people? It's just complicated. And I will say, I don't begrudge Wizards for respectfully failing to get a contract that allows them to, or being unable to do this. It's Marvel. It's a Disney. It's a wildly complicated process. There's a reason that, Spider-Man was licensed from Sony, but only for the movies and not the shows. Vincent D'Onofrio, who plays Kingpin in Daredevil, recently said in an interview, he was like, yeah, I think they only have the license for me to do streaming shows. I legally can't show up in a movie. Right? This is not simple stuff, but it is a genuine failing, right? It is Wizards of the Coast didn't get a thing that they really, really should have gotten as part of these negotiations. And I think that is the crux of sort of the problem there is, it's very much like hey man, I get it. I feel ya. This is not an easy task you were given, but you still did not clear that bar, regardless of the difficulty of it.
You really swung for the fences, but we've grounded into a double play, I fear.
Yeah. and I imagine it's, somebody saying, hey, we need to do standard sets. We need to put Universes Beyond in standard sets, while somebody else is trying to negotiate these contracts, and just everybody working on different parts of these things. And suddenly you've made a decision to put these things in standard before you actually know if they can get on Arena, and there's nothing you can do about it anymore.
It actually comes down to it that actually Second Dinner, the makers of Marvel Snap, do pretty much hold the all-encompassing IP rights to making a Marvel card game, except for this weird other, game that exists over here and has existed for a long time. Marvel Snap has it all. Sorry, everyone.
Right.
Which is very speculatory. But
I think what will be interesting to see going forward is the success or failure of this experiment, for lack of a better way of putting it, and how it influences for future stuff. Because if it's received really well, then Wizards gets a message, maybe we can save a few bucks on licensing and do this a couple times a year. and not always have to license the digital rights for the Universes Beyond property that we're putting into a standard set, because people were cool with this and it turned out fine. Or it's a disaster, and they, going forward, make it a mandatory part of licensing discussions and say, if you want this to be a full set, we need to sign off on this.
Yes.
And I think this is going to be a bridge point, and I would imagine it leans the latter, but we don't know, you know, because sometimes in business, the cheaper option wins. And if this just goes well, maybe we'll see more of it, which is sort of an even more harrowing thought.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that the interesting part of the discussion that I think, you know, we don't know what comes next. Is this a temporary solution that just by necessity or some weird kerfluffle of Marvel while in development got changed from a non-standard legal set to a standard legal set, and something happened, or is this just the one IP they couldn't get? So for the Marvel sets, we're just going to have to suck it up and deal with it. And then we know it's a bad solution, but it's a standard legal set, so we have no other option. You know, we don't actually know where this is going. We just know that for Marvel the Spider-Man and assumedly future Marvel sets, of which there's going to be 3.
I don't remember
4? I don't remember the count either.
All I remember is them saying...
There may not even be an official count.
I don't know if there is, but I know that they said multi-set deal, right? So we know there are more. We know that this is not... We can very confidently say that this is not the last time a Marvel set will be in standard, and it very confidently say it's not the last time a Marvel set in standard will get through the Omenpath.
Yep, exactly. And... you know, it's so weird. It's so tough.
And again, this is not a thing that's going to get brought back up. We're not going to know the answers to a lot of these questions until, what would it be? July, August for spoilers? July and August for more spoilers? And
it is weird.
Even then...
This is what? Technically our 5, 6, 7. Marvel the Spider-Man is technically our 7th Marvel product if you count all 5 secret layers individually and also count this really weird box with non-standard legal cards in it that they showed off at the toy fair.
And the Deadpool secret layer.
And the Deadpool secret layer.
Yeah.
5, 6, 7, our 8th Marvel product. We're kind of getting up there.
Well, that
already.
scene box is interesting, right? The one we revealed is because one of the things I sort of... I'm very grateful that they allowed us to reveal that, but it was funny to me at the time that we were revealing non-standard legal cards as the first, not commander cards, not standard legal cards, this other thing, because I saw a lot of responses to our article that was like, I'm so excited to use this card in standard, and other people having to be like, no, it's not there. And we thought that was confusing. And now the actual standard legal Spider-Man cards are not even going to look like Spider-Man cards in every place, right? And probably will have a different set symbol, I imagine, because I imagine that that's also part of the IP that is protected that can't go on digital. So, that was already confusing, and we already saw that confusion bubble up, and now this is, I think it is I feel very bad for Wizards, honestly, that the first Marvel set out of the gate has sort of been nothing but confusion so far.
Yes, and this only makes it worse.
Yeah.
I was agog when I saw Spider-Man cards on my timeline, and I was like, sick! The Spider-Man set is here. No. A weird product that you will be able to buy for your kids at Christmas is what is here, I guess.
Yeah.
Play those pumpkin bombs in Commander, kid.
Yeah,
I think it's a cool
version
product.
It's a neat little thing, but it is very much like we didn't make Commander decks.
I simply would have put standard legal cards into it. That's all I'm saying. I have nothing else to add to that one.
You want those pumpkin bombs in standard? That'd be crazy.
I don't even remember what they do. I'm going to be real.
It probably wouldn't be very good.
Do you know how many Magic cards this guy looks at every week? They're all gone. They all left my brain. I remember Cultivate. That's about it. Cultivate is the only card. Cultivate is the card currently occupying my one brain space to remember one Magic card at a time. Sorry, everyone.
I recently built a very casual mono green just big cards commander deck. And the one deck building rule that I steadfastly stayed by is that it runs every copy of Cultivate. What
about every copy of Explosive Vegetation?
That's the 4-mana one, right? Yeah. So Cultivate, there are 4 copies. If you're in a mono green deck, there are 4 copies of like mechanically identical or close to Cultivate. There's Kodama's Reach, there's Flare of Cultivation, and then there's one with Nissa that only gets basic forests, and has like an arcane thing. I can't remember exactly.
That's awesome.
Every copy of Cultivate.
That's awesome. I love that so much. I'm looking them all up now.
Yeah.
3-drop, get basic lands, green. Oh, okay, Gatherer, you didn't get the message. Whatever. It did 3+ for some reason. Whatever. Who cares? Not me. That's such a funny... did you do the ones that got 1 basic land, or it had to be 2 basic lands?
There's 4 cards that are 3 mana in mono green, put a basic land tapped onto the battlefield, put a basic land into your hand. Except, one of them is basic forests only. And then one of them is Flare of Cultivation, which is the MH3, you can sack a green creature instead to cast it for free.
I forgot they printed that card. I assumed I would see it in like every casual deck, but I don't know if I've ever seen it.
Yeah, I think some of those flares, the Flare of Cultivation very specifically is funny to me. It's 1 green instead of 2 green, so maybe that's part of it. Is that it's less of a fixer, right?
Yeah,
less splashable
sure.
in that way.
Yeah, you already have to have double green. Yeah.
But it is just Cultivate.
Yeah.
It is just
Cultivate with 1 extra step in that if you really want it, you can have it for free.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. All right, I'm glad that you did that. I think that's something that deserves to exist in the world. And I hope that you'll get to play a really cool Spiderman card in it. But you
just
can
not digitally.
No, you can print out the digital version onto a little slip of paper and say, look, guys, it's the same thing. It just is a Magic card now. It just looks like a normal universe within Magic card.
Who would even be green? And Killer Croc? I don't know. Killer Croc is Batman, the other crocodile themed. There's too many.
This was a really long discussion that was had on a Magic the Gathering podcast that I do listen to. I have forgotten which one it is. They were really arguing about the color identity of, it was the Unsleeved podcast with Patrick Sullivan and Patrick Chapin. They were desperately trying to come up with color identities for some of the different Spider-Man villains and stuff, because the color structure of Magic is pretty prescriptive. It's gotten less over time. But they were really struggling to come up with like white characters and also green characters. Like green X, white X. Selesnya was their one real hang up. But I think like for green, you could do like, I don't know, Killer Croc, he's an animal? Kind of. Is he Simic? He's probably Simic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You could like Kraven the Hunter would probably be green-ish.
Kraven the Hunter, like a mono green. It'd be so hard, I think, to do like a mono green or mono white. But instead, because it's a Magic the Gathering set, what we are going to get is like mono blue Doc Ock or something in the uncommon slot, because it just has to work that way.
Yeah. Well, good news. All of those will be renamed if you don't like them. Yeah, I'll say it's going to be interesting to see how this happens. My genuine hope is that they really genuinely plan for this in the design process and genericize as much stuff as they can, and then put the flavor, the Spider-Man flavor, in the art and the flavor text as much as they can, so that the mechanical side of things and the names of cards can stay as recognizable and consistent with that different art and those different that as possible, or at least use that aggressively whenever they're considering cards that are going to be staples in Standard.
We don't actually know what the execution's going to be. We don't know how prepared Wizards is for this. We just have a 200 word maybe announcement. about it. Oh, and I guess the one really relevant thing we haven't mentioned is that it is not for the thing where it could perhaps be the most relevant. It's not like they're going to be making a Warhammer 40K in-universe commander cards to put onto Magic the Gathering Online so people can play, Triumph of Catherine in their legacy decks where the card is really good and the legacy metagame in between online and in paper is split up because depending on whether or not you want to play pre-war formal wear in your decks that care about really good artifacts, because pre-wear formal wear is a great one of for some decks. Cool. You can play it in paper, you can't play it online. They're not using it for that. This is specifically they're currently only planning to create Through the Omenpaths releases for full sets that are legal in all formats, aka standard legal Universe Beyond sets.
Which again, I think to some extent makes sense, right? Because like we've been talking about, this does not sound like a small task. But I think that also does fuel some of my skepticism because they seem to acknowledge that it is not a small task, right? And so you get the question of how many resources are being put behind this and all that. And then, like you said, we just won't know. I'm trying to not be completely skeptical and write it off as a total disaster because I think there are ways that they can do this, competently. And I think they are good at making Magic sets for the most part. But regardless, I think we're also going to start hitting July and August and September as we get closer to this set, and this is going to become more and more and more of an issue as we start seeing what these alternate versions of cards are actually going to look like. And
I agree with you, Tom. I guess we will just have to wait and see. I think that's all that I have to say.
Yeah,
about
me too.
Through the Omenpaths. And that's all that you have to say about the Omenpaths?
I mean, I could talk about this all day, but probably.
It feels like eventually we may go a little bit in a circle.
Yeah. Here's a one little positive I'll tack on the end. I think that using the Omenpaths as a structure for this, cute idea. I'm not opposed to the Omenpaths, and I think that's a nice little way to frame it.
Mm-hmm. And I do think in that realm, if they are going all out, I feel like what we will end up with is a plane that we will never see again, that for whatever reason can be skinned pretty closely to Spider-Man, and then we move on with our life.
Wouldn't it be wild if the first actual modern day city set we get is some
Through the Omenpaths
otherworld digital only
Jace has
thing
a gun
that we just never go back to?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man.
The fourth host heads would lose on that day, I guess. I've seen some of them being like, whatever. Maybe they'll give, this would be a great chance for them to give a card to an iconic older character that, has never had a card, and that would be cool. Unfortunately, I don't think is what's going to end up happening.
Yeah.
So, Tom, before we go, I have two more questions for you. One, we have the Patreon exclusive question of, what are you liking to do outside of Magic the Gathering these days? That's been my favorite question to ask people. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then also, do you have anything else to leave the listening audience of the Herald's Horn with before we go?
No. Keep on keeping on. Y'all are great.
And go play the Blueprints.
Yeah. I reviewed Blueprints for IGN, so yeah, that's a shout out. But otherwise, I'm too stacked up. I'm like I was telling you before. I'm designing a cube right now, so that's taking my time. I want to play Split Fiction still. The Clair Obscure is about to come out. There's too many games right now. I'm not going to leave the listeners with something out of respect. They have enough on their plate.
It's true. Tom, thank you so much for joining me here in the Herald's Horn.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.